Welcome back to our bigger picture discussion on the war on voting. On our panel tonight, Barbara Arnwine, President and Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Hilary Shelton, Washington Bureau Director and Senior Vice President for Advocacy at the NAACP, and Katherine Culliton-Gonzalez, Senior Attorney and Director of Voter Protection at the Advancement Project. Let's get back to it. Two of the three of you are attorneys, and I'm just curious. The Constitution mentions the phrase right to vote several times, and it's been amended with the phrase right to vote several times, but it's always been in very narrow, people shall not be denied the right to vote based on race. People should not be denied the right to vote based on gender. Is there, am I misreading that, is there no explicit federal right to vote? Does anybody, or should there be? Catherine?
Well, there definitely should be. There isn't an explicit right to vote, an enumerated right to vote in our Constitution, and we're one of the few countries that doesn't have it. Iran doesn't have it, and we don't. South Africa has an enumerated right to vote, and so it's an explicit fundamental right. And since Bush v. Gore, many of us have been thinking that we really need to do a campaign to have an explicit constitutional right to vote.
In Bush v. Gore, the decision from the Supreme Court explicitly pointed out that there's no specific enumerated right to vote.
Right, and then we wouldn't have a patchwork.
Well, and quite frankly, it was from that Jesse Jackson Jr. actually introduced legislation to create an amendment to the Constitution that would establish an affirmative right to vote. Though certainly not abridging the right to vote is acceptable now, and very clearly no one's vote should be abridged or in any other ways interfered with. But having that affirmative right would be more deliberative.
Yeah, this is Barbara. This is one of those vestiges of slavery in the very beginning, just like the Electoral College.
It's the federalism system.
I mean,
it's one of the problems that we have in this country is that we have 50 states with 50 different election laws. And that is a huge problem because it creates all kinds of confusion. Right. Because nobody can say to a neighbor or to a friend in a different state what their law is, because the law of their state is going to be totally different than one. So it doesn't make sense that if somebody who is an ex-felon in one state can vote, but leaves that state and moves to Florida and all of a sudden discovers they can't vote anymore.
Right.
These are the kinds of inconsistencies that we see repetitively in this country. So what we need in this country is massive electoral reform to make our state laws more uniform, to be more open for voters, more accessible for voters, and we need to do away with all of this history of slavery. I mean, most people don't realize that all of these felon disenfranchisement laws are based in slavery. Sure. They don't even know the Electoral College
was based in slavery.
Is based in slavery.
It was to protect the slave states.
Exactly, because without the issue of slavery, there never would be an Electoral College in the United States. So that's why we got this anomaly in our democracy where we don't have a direct democracy. Instead, we have
So is this going to require
a
constitutional amendment, or is this something that can be done? You suggested, Hilary, that Jesse Jackson's introduced legislation. Is that enough?
Well, the legislation would actually kick off the amendment process.
I see.
There's a process to amend the Constitution.
So we do need to amend the Constitution too.
It would need to amend the Constitution.
Because there are not a lot of affirmative rights in the Constitution. Mostly it is, as President Obama said when he was campaigning in 2008, and the right-wingers went crazy about it, but he said it's a negative Bill of Rights. It basically is it's a list of the things that the government can't do to us. But not so much. Here's what. Anyway, Catherine.
Yeah, and I guess it also would stop this, patchwork of laws that Barbara spoke about so eloquently. So we have counties that run elections too. We have 13,000 counties, and over again, the voting rights community, the civil rights community has to bring lawsuits and has to, really keep an eye on 13,000 different counties to try and protect our most fundamental and precious right in this country. It's really the foundation of American democracy. And really, when we all go to vote, it's a day when we're all supposed to be equal. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or what your race or what your age is. A lot of these laws are difficult for the elderly, for students. We're supposed to have an equal voice in our democracy. That's the foundation of America. So it's about time we had it enumerated. We have been winning our lawsuits, but we think that's because we're right, and we might as well make it an affirmative constitutional right and get rid of this mess that we're in right now.
Absolutely agreed. and it's an important thing. To what extent is Citizens United playing a role in all of this, Barbara? This avalanche of money coming in, is it funding voter suppression efforts? Is this compounding the problem of the right to vote?
Well, you know, what I am worried about in this election, I mean, we all saw that AP report from last week showing that prejudice, anti-black prejudice against African Americans in this country has increased from 2008, and it's also increased, anti-Hispanic prejudice has also increased. And I think a lot of that's because in a lot of these advertisements that super PACs and others are doing, there's a lot of hidden racial coding.
Oh, sure. In fact, could it be that it's not so much that prejudice has increased, but the willingness of people to express it to a pollster has increased? Yeah. People are more willing to say it out loud.
No, I think the environment has been created now where it's more acceptable for people to feel that they can express that racism. When you have people, members of Congress, yelling in the well of Congress during a State of the Union at the president, you lie. Yeah. When you have, you know, these kinds of, you know, expressive, you know, all of this, you know, what things that Limbaugh and so many others say, I think it creates that atmosphere. And then when you have these, you know, these ads talking about food stamps and talking about welfare, we know who they're talking about. They're not talking about the majority of the real recipients who are white, but it's in the minds of people that it's those other people.
It's become code for people.
It's code. And I think that's the problem that I see also, is that not only are they in this whole pro-business movement, but they also have this movement that is very racially based.
Now, and this was, I mean, the Democratic Party certainly is, you know, no angel in this. Historically, they were the party of slavery. That flipped with Nixon's Southern strategy when the Republican Party said, okay, you know, the Democrats are going to go for civil rights. Let's pick up the white racists in the South. I realize none of your organizations are partisan. None of you are here as representatives of partisan organizations. And so feel free to pass on this if you want. But it seems to me, as an observer, as somebody who's been in the news business for a lot of years and now more of a commentator, but whatever, that this is much more a strategy of the Republican Party to suppress minority votes than it is the Democratic Party. How do we deal with that partisan dimension of this? And to what extent might I be right in this?
Well, let me just say that we're nonpartisan. We don't endorse political candidates or political parties, but we recognize who's doing the wrongdoings. Yeah. And quite frankly, sadly and unfortunately, more of that is being done by those that want to suppress African-American votes and other racial and ethnic minority votes. Unfortunately, I guess, as we look at these issues, or maybe it's fortunately, if you look at the number of African Americans that are members of the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, it's not an endorsement, it's just a reality. Yeah. If we look at those who participated in the last conventions, the same thing is also true. Quite frankly, if we looked at who actually crafted the platforms for the Democratic Party's convention, 26% were African American. If we look at who actually crafted the platform for the Republican Party, it was 2.5%. In essence, there was a huge difference in that involvement, and as we look at the policies, who's going to support which platform now, and frankly, who's going to support which candidate now, it is that kind of suppression that ends up targeting African Americans. You can call it what you want to call it. We still call it disenfranchisement. We still call it the targeting of African Americans. We still call it problematic.
Right.
And it's a losing strategy.
Absolutely.
Well, over time.
Over time. Over time.
Because demographics are shifting.
Right.
Catherine, we have a graphic of who has photo ID in America. Photo ID is very much a, you know, if you've never had the money to own a car, why have a driver's license, right, for example. And so we see here African Americans in the United States, 25% of the African American population that's eligible, old enough to vote, doesn't have a valid photo ID. 20% of the Asian, 19% of Latinos, college students, 18% of them don't. Seniors, they've abandoned their cars, they're no longer driving. People earning less than $35,000. And then we get down to whites, 8%. And so it seems like there is, you know, a real difference here And it's almost like, you know, Paul Weyrich, we played the clip earlier, he said, I don't want everybody to vote. Somebody sat down with this chart and said, okay, let's just pick off these groups. Is this a paranoid, you know, comment?
That's why we have the Voting Rights Act. That's why we're winning our cases, because these are a form of poll taxes. Some people could afford to pay the poll tax, and our greatest civil rights legislation, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, said that poll taxes and literacy tests and obstacles and manipulation of the vote that have a discriminatory impact are also illegal in this country. So that's why we're winning our cases. This is on the Republican Party platform. Let's just, you know, be upfront about it. We're nonpartisan, but certain politicians are manipulating voting rights for their own political gain,
and certainly trying to. And this raises the question of you know, basically getting away with it. I mean, you look at Katherine Harris knocked, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, 20 to 80,000 African Americans off the voting rolls in Florida before that 537 count came up, you know, and nobody ever prosecuted, nobody ever even discussed it.
Well, we sued. We filed NAACP.
But shouldn't people go to jail for this kind of stuff?
Hey, yes. That's why we believe in the Anti-Deceptive Practices Act should be passed. That's why we believe in voter registration modernization, where, you know, people are automatically registered, because 90% of all problems on election day are registration related.
Why not be automatically registered when you're assigned a Social Security number?
Exactly.
And as soon as you hit 18, boom.
Boom, like you do for selective service, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why not? I mean, we think that, you know, there are these really great reforms that should be there, and that these are the things. I also want to note that there's another community that's really impacted by these laws, and that's the community of people with disabilities.
Right, who also are not driving cars.
Exactly, significant numbers, and so we just have to really understand how this broad sweep is. Plus, it's a problem in search of a legislation in search of a problem. There's no voter fraud. That's why we keep winning the cases.
Yeah, well, this is the thing.
Show.
More people died last year from televisions falling on their heads than committed voter fraud. Seriously, 36 versus 31. We have just 30 seconds left. Katherine, final thoughts here?
This has been an excellent panel. I certainly hope that people aren't intimidated by this wave of voter suppression and get out and vote. We're going to be with the Election Protection Coalition and protecting your rights.
Great. Absolutely. If people run into a problem, they should call 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Call in, get instructions, let us know any problems going on throughout the country.
And Barbara,
yes.
the last 10 seconds are yours.
And Americans, we are so proud of you. You've taken these voter suppression laws and you said that that's motivation to early vote. You have shown them that these strategies don't work. So call 1-866-OUR-VOTE to get help.
There you go. Paul Weyrich spinning in his grave. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Much appreciated.